She left me in the rain and said it was for her own growth. No umbrella, no hug, no hesitation. I just need space to focus on myself, Storm. You'll be fine. You always are. That was the last thing she said before turning her back, stepping into her ride share, and closing the door like she hadn't just ended 3 years in under 10 seconds. I stood there on the pavement, soaked. One hand clenched around a velvet box she never got to see. I had planned to propose, not because I thought I was perfect, but because I thought we were worth something. Turns out I was the only one still thinking that. Noah always had a way of making even cruelty sound gentle. That's what hurt more than the breakup itself. She made walking away feel like an act of self-care. Like breaking my heart was a form of healing. Hers, not mine. I didn't chase her. I didn't text her afterward. She didn't check in either. Maybe she thought I'd beg, spiral, post cryptic quotes. Maybe she wanted to watch me unravel from a distance. But I didn't fall apart. I focused, just like she told me to. Not on her, not on what I lost. I focused on what she underestimated. The quiet man she left behind, the one she thought would wait around, broken and loyal, didn't wait. He disappeared, and what came back wasn't who she left, because the version of me that rose from that rain wasn't heartbroken. He was building, and this time, he wouldn't be looking back. My name's Storm. People always assume it's a nickname, like I gave it to myself to sound tough. But no, my mother named me that after the rain started pounding the windows the night I was born. She said I arrived during chaos and would probably learn how to survive it. She was right. I've never been the loudest guy in the room. I never needed to be. I observe, I listen, and when I speak, people hear it. It's not charm, it's presence. And for a long time, Noah said that was what drew her in. We met 3 years ago at a friend's art exhibition. She was wearing these ridiculous orange heels that she claimed were comfortable but limped out of after 2 hours. I offered her my sneakers for the walk back to the station. She laughed, said, "You always like rescuing girls or just me?" I said, "Just you. The others can limp." That was the start. Noah was bright, bold, endlessly curious. She had a sharp tongue and an even sharper sense of self. At least that's how it seemed. She wanted to build a life of ambition and meaning, and I was drawn to that. I'm a designer. Architecture, interiors, layouts that feel like emotion wrapped in glass. She loved that about me. Said I turned blueprints into feelings. We moved in together after a year. It wasn't perfect. No relationship is. But we had a rhythm. She'd rant about meetings and corporate chaos. I'd sketch late into the night, with music playing low. She brought color to my world, and I gave hers structure. Or at least I thought I did. But cracks show slowly. First in words, then in silences. I started noticing how Noah's compliments turned observational. "You're so focused on your work. It's impressive," she'd say. But there'd be a weight behind the word impressive, like maybe it wasn't admiration anymore. I didn't realize it then, but admiration often turns to resentment in people who start doubting themselves. Noah's career plateaued after she left a big magazine job to explore her own creative agency. She thought she'd be flooded with clients and partnerships. It didn't happen. She stopped talking about her goals, started scrolling more, smiling less. I asked if she was okay. She said she just needed space. So I gave it. What I didn't know was that space meant less me, more her. When she said she wanted to focus on herself, she made it sound noble, like I should be proud she was choosing growth. But there's a difference between self-growth and self-preservation. And there's a difference between needing space and building a life where you're not invited. She broke up with me like it was a self-care routine. No anger, no argument, just a tidy exit. She told me I was wonderful, that I didn't do anything wrong, that I deserved someone who wouldn't hold themselves back the way she apparently felt she was. I almost believed her. Almost. Until I saw her with Wolf 2 weeks later. Wolf had been a mutual friend. Mostly hers, to be honest. He hung around our group, always floating at the edges. I never thought of him as a threat. Didn't even think. Noah noticed him like that, but apparently she had. When I saw them at a launch party, laughing like nothing had ever existed between us, I understood everything. She hadn't left to find herself. She just wanted to see if someone else would make her feel like more. It didn't break me, because I wasn't confused anymore. And confusion was the most painful part. Once the fog cleared, I started to remember who I was before I tried to become her mirror. I was Storm. I didn't need permission to matter. I didn't need validation from someone who gave up when growth required discomfort. I wasn't the kind of man you leave and find again when you're bored. I was the kind of man who disappears and rebuilds, and that's exactly what I did. While she was taking selfies with Wolf and posting healing journey captions that sounded more like cover-ups than clarity, I was working. I was living. I made silence my strategy. No public shade, no indirect tweets. I wanted her to see me, not hear me, because some people don't respond to words. They respond to absence. And when they realize the silence isn't waiting for them to break it, that's when it starts to hurt. I didn't know what she'd do when she realized I wasn't just recovering. I was becoming someone she couldn't reach again. But I knew I didn't care anymore. And that made me dangerous, to her, to my past, to the version of myself that once waited for someone who only knew how to leave. It was a Thursday night when the confirmation hit me. Not through a dramatic reveal, not through catching them kissing or some damning confession. No, it was quieter than that. Almost laughably modern. A tagged Instagram story. Wolf had posted a boomerang of 2 glasses clinking together across a bar. No caption, no geotag. But the reflection in the window behind them showed her profile. Noah's. Same off-shoulder blouse she wore in our old vacation pictures. Same way she tilted her head when she laughed. The comment section was full of their inside jokes, people cheering them on. And that's when the pit in my stomach shifted. I hadn't lost her to some random phase. I'd lost her to someone I used to let crash on our couch. A friend who sat at our table, borrowed my tools, laughed at my jokes. Wolf. I didn't message her. I didn't message him. I didn't give either of them the satisfaction of knowing they'd cracked me. But that night, I laid on the cold floor of my apartment, not the couch, not the bed, the floor, because it felt grounded, solid, less like I'd slip. I tried to replay the moments. When did she start looking at him like he mattered more than I did? Was it during those nights she said she needed headspace and went for long walks without texting back? Was it at those events she didn't feel up to bringing me to anymore? The patterns were all there. I just hadn't read them clearly. Until now. But the part that ate at me wasn't just that she'd moved on. It was that she'd prepared me for it. Every time she talked about self-love, every quote about letting go to grow, those weren't affirmations. They were her exit strategy. She was conditioning me to accept the end before it even began. I could handle heartbreak. What I couldn't handle was being lied to under the disguise of enlightenment, and what made it worse was Wolf. He wasn't better than me. He wasn't more talented. He wasn't stronger or kinder or more emotionally present. He was just available at the right time. And for someone who was spiraling, that was enough. Meadow came back into the picture around then. She didn't enter. Like Noah, with glitter and chaos and poetry. She arrived like still water. I ran into her at a cafe we used to frequent during college. She was sitting alone, sketching in a notebook, sipping lukewarm coffee that she kept forgetting to drink. Hesitated before saying her name. Storm? She said it first. Her voice hadn't changed. Neither had her eyes. We talked for 2 hours like no time had passed at all. She didn't ask me about Noah. She didn't ask about what went wrong. Instead, she said, I always knew you'd turn your pain into something quiet and powerful. And just like that, I remembered what it felt like to be seen without being studied. With Noah, I often felt like an idea. Like she liked the concept of me more than the reality. But Meadow? She saw the tired behind my eyes, the way I clenched, my hands when I was trying not to feel. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't offer advice. She just stayed. It scared me at first. Because I was so used to chaos, I mistook peace for boredom. But peace is louder when you're used to war. Noah reached out again a few weeks later. A short text. Hey, I know it's weird, but can we catch up sometime? I just want to talk. No expectations. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, but because I was finally learning the difference between closure and reopening a wound that had already started to scar. Wolf messaged me 2 days after. Said, I didn't plan it like this. I didn't mean to hurt you, man. I stared at that message for a long time, because betrayal never comes with fangs and blood. It comes with familiar hands and soft apologies. I replied only once. You were in my house. You knew what she meant to me. You just didn't care enough to stop. He didn't respond, didn't need to. There was nothing else to say. Meanwhile, Meadow and I kept growing, quietly, intentionally. She wasn't a rebound. She was a reminder of everything love should feel like when it's real. And still, I knew Noah would circle back eventually. People always return when they realize you stopped orbiting them. They think you'll still be there, waiting, aching, hoping. But I had stopped waiting the day I saw her reflection in that glass, because that was the day I realized something permanent. I was no longer someone looking to be chosen. I was someone who had already chosen myself. Storm didn't cry. Not in the obvious way. He didn't break down in the shower or scream into a pillow or punch a wall. His pain was quiet, heavy. It settled into the corners of his apartment like a fog that wouldn't lift. Every room carried her imprint. The closet still held a scarf she'd left behind. The kitchen drawer still had her mismatched tea bags. But the loudest echo lived in the silence, Noah's absence. He tried sleeping, but his body stayed alert, like it was waiting for the sound of keys turning in the door. They never came. He'd roll over at 3 a.m. and instinctively reach for her. Nothing, just cold sheets and colder memories. There were moments when he'd forget. For a second, he'd see a funny meme or stumble across an old song and think, she'll love this. Then he'd remember, she's not here. She doesn't care. That hurt the most. Not the betrayal. Not even Wolf. It was that she didn't care. Storm began walking more. Late-night walks with no direction. Through alleyways, quiet parks, city blocks. He watched couples laugh over midnight food trucks, strangers kiss under neon signs. And all he could think was, I used to have that. She used to look at me like that. But she didn't anymore. She looked at him now. Wolf. And Storm couldn't understand how easily he'd been replaced. He replayed every argument, every red flag, every, I'm just tired, she used to say. How many of those nights had she already made her decision? How long had she been planning to leave while pretending to stay? Storm couldn't find peace in work like he used to. The sketches wouldn't flow. Lines felt forced. Angles were off. He'd sit in front of a blank screen for hours, willing himself to focus. But instead of building, he was unraveling. His body stayed still. But inside, he was screaming. Meadow noticed it first. They met again for coffee, and as she stirred her drink, she looked at him gently. You're here, but you're not here, Storm. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt too small. So she waited, and eventually, he admitted, I feel like I'm not enough. Like if I had done one thing differently, she'd still be here. That maybe I was too boring, too stable, too easy to walk away from. Meadow didn't argue. She didn't tell him he was wrong. She just said, or maybe she never knew how to value something that didn't hurt to hold. Those words stayed with him. Haunted him. He'd lie. Awake, wondering if that was it. Was he too safe? Too steady? He had given Noah space, support, devotion. But maybe she needed chaos to feel alive. And when she didn't find it with him, she created it. The worst part? He still missed her. Even knowing what she did, even after the lies, his heart still reached for her like muscle memory, but it wasn't love anymore. It was habit. It was history. Storm started writing again. Not to publish, not to post, just to pour it somewhere. He filled notebook pages with raw, tangled thoughts. Some entries were letters he'd never send. Some were just questions he'd never get answers to. One night he wrote, "She left to find herself. I lost myself finding her." He closed the book and stared at the ceiling. He knew healing wasn't a straight road. Some nights you move forward. Some nights you bleed quietly. Into your pillow. But the difference now? He wasn't afraid to feel it. To sit with it. To face it. Because that was the only way out. No shortcuts, no distractions, just the truth. And the truth was, Noah had made her choice. She walked away from something real to chase something fleeting. And Storm? He was still here. Still standing, still whole, a little bruised, a little wiser, but not broken, not anymore. It started with a knock on his studio door. Storm was sketching again, finally. Not perfectly, not effortlessly, but with a rhythm that had been missing. For weeks, the lines were cleaner, the forms made sense. And then the knock. He opened the door to find Meadow standing there, holding her phone, brows drawn tight. "You need to see this," she said. On her screen was a video, grainy, handheld, a phone recording. The caption read, "Designer breaks down in public. Ex-girlfriend walks away with new man." Storm clicked play. It was him. A clip from 2 weeks ago. The night he saw Noah with Wolf. He hadn't known anyone was recording. He hadn't even realized how visibly shaken he looked as he left the party early. But someone captured it. His silence, his clenched fists, the hurt in his eyes. And now it was being shared across gossip blogs and Instagram reels. The comments were brutal. "This is why women leave. Emotionally unavailable." "She upgraded. Sorry, not sorry." "Dude looks like he's about to cry. What a weak man." Storm's hands turned cold. Noah hadn't posted the video herself. But she liked it. Her name, there in the likes. A small heart beside her username. It wasn't just disrespect. It was deliberate. She saw his pain, and she approved it. He sat down slowly, the weight hitting harder than anything before. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't just a breakup. It was a campaign, a quiet war to frame him as the one who failed. And suddenly, all the pieces clicked into place. The way she'd ended things just before his firm's big client, pitch. The way Wolf kept showing up in the same spaces, uninvited, unbothered. The little rumors floating around that Storm had been emotionally distant, that he didn't believe in her career, that he was the reason she left. He had stayed silent to take the high road. She had weaponized that silence. Meadow looked at him carefully. "What are you going to do?" Storm's voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. "I'm going to remind them who I am." And this time he wasn't just healing. He was coming back, for everything. Storm didn't need revenge. He needed clarity. But sometimes clarity comes only after everything burns. The night of the industry showcase was meant to be about design. His new line was set to debut. He had poured months of silence, heartbreak, and awakening into it. He'd taken everything Noah thought was weakness, his stillness, his calm, his quiet love, and turned it into art so bold it made the room go still. The crowd loved it. Applause echoed. Clients praised the emotional tension in his work. Journalists scribbled down quotes. He smiled, bowed once, and stepped back behind the curtain. That's where he saw her. Noah. Wearing the same perfume she always used. Dressed to be seen. Leaning casually against a wall like this was her story too. Storm didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. But she smiled like the gap between them hadn't grown into a canyon. "You're doing really well," she said, softly. "I knew you would." He looked at her then, really looked. The woman who once called his consistency boring was now staring at him like it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever lost. He nodded once. "Thanks." Nothing more. Noah stepped closer. "I shouldn't have let things go like they did. Wolf, that wasn't serious. It never was. It just happened. He said nothing. She kept going. And seeing you again, I realized I've never felt that safe with anyone else. You're still you, Storm. I miss that. The gall of it. He should have laughed. He should have turned away. Instead, he let her speak. Because part of healing is watching the person who broke you try to rebuild what they destroyed, and realizing they no longer hold the pieces. Do you remember that night I left? She asked. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I needed space. But now I think maybe I was just scared of how real you were. Scared, he repeated, quietly. She nodded. You loved me in ways I didn't think I deserved. He finally spoke, steady as ever. You're right, you didn't. She blinked, taken aback by the calm cruelty in his tone. I didn't cheat, she said, defensive now. Not really. Storm tilted his head. That's not what I said, but thank you for confirming it. Noah looked down. I made mistakes. He stayed silent. Let the weight of her words fall to the floor between them. I thought maybe if we started over. You liked the video, he cut in. That made her go still. What? The one where I left the event early. Where I looked broken. You liked it. That wasn't an accident. She didn't respond. Why? He asked. Not angry, just curious. Noah swallowed hard. I was hurt too. I thought you didn't care. You went silent. You never even tried to talk. Storm took a slow breath. You dumped me. You paraded. Wolf around like he was a trophy. You left and never looked back until you saw something worth circling back to. Silence, he continued, voice low. You didn't miss me, Noah. You missed the version of yourself that existed when I loved you. She stepped back like the words stung, and they did, because they were true. Storm walked past her toward the exit. She called after him, Wait. Storm, please. He paused, turned halfway. You chose a moment over a man. That was your right. But it came with a cost. What cost? She whispered. He looked at her then, really looked, for the last time. The cost of never being trusted again. And then he walked away, back into the spotlight, back into the applause, back into a life where he didn't have to shrink to make someone else feel whole. Later that night, as the showcase party buzzed, Meadow joined him. She didn't ask what happened backstage. She simply placed a hand on his. I saw her watching. You, she said. Storm nodded. I let her. Did it help? He exhaled. Yeah, it helped me realize I don't owe closure to someone who weaponized my kindness. Meadow smiled. Then I'm glad she showed up. So was he. Because in that moment, surrounded by light, creativity, and peace, Storm understood something for the first time in years. He hadn't just healed. He had outgrown the version of himself that needed her approval, and that was freedom. It had been 6 months since the showcase. Storm never said her name again, not to anyone. Not even in his thoughts. Noah had tried a few more times, email, texts, even a letter delivered to his office. Meadow saw it before he did, placed it gently on his desk without saying a word. Storm never opened it. Some things didn't deserve a reply. What mattered was the life that came after. Storm's name was now attached to one of the fastest-growing boutique design firms in the city. His new collection had been licensed by an international luxury brand. Interviews rolled in. Magazine, features, TED Talks. He became the voice of understated brilliance, of calm, focused evolution. The man who was once left behind was now the one people raced to catch up with, but it wasn't the fame, it wasn't the fortune, it was the clarity. He woke up in the morning with peace instead of pressure. He didn't wonder if he was enough. He knew he was. Meadow was still there. Steady, quiet, unwavering. Not in his shadow, not above him, but beside him, and in her presence he never felt like a version of himself. He felt whole, real. Seen. Then came the phone call. It was from a friend on the media circuit. Storm, have you seen the piece? Noah's company tried to pitch? No, he said flatly. They're running a mini-doc about women rising after toxic relationships. She's the centerpiece. Storm didn't respond. They're using photos of you, old ones, from back when you were together. They edited them to make you look aggressive, emotionally cold, manipulative even. He hung up, not in anger, in preparation. He called his lawyer, then his PR director, then a journalist he'd helped once by designing a tribute gallery for her late father. He told her everything. No screaming, no slander. Just facts, screenshots, timelines, and the truth. 2 weeks later, the response piece dropped. Silence isn't guilt, the other side of her story. It didn't attack Noah. It didn't name-call. It simply outlined what happened, chronologically, respectfully, devastatingly. There were pictures of him with bruised eyes from sleepless nights, texts showing Noah's double life, dated event photos with Wolf that overlapped her claimed self-care retreat, testimonies from clients who worked with Storm during the darkest weeks, marveling at his professionalism while grieving inside. But the final nail wasn't his words, it was hers. The article embedded the video Noah had liked, the one of Storm, leaving in pain. The caption now read, "Is this what empowerment looks like to you?" Public opinion flipped. Hard. The backlash was swift. Comment sections that once cheered Noah's glow-up turned into graveyards of disbelief. People dug up her old posts, the contradictions, the rehearsed victimhood. Sponsors pulled out from her documentary deal. Her PR rep dropped her 2 days later. Noah's final post was a vague apology about miscommunication and social media distortion. She deleted it 12 hours later. Her account went private, then silent. Storm said nothing. He just went back to work, until one rainy evening Meadow handed him a letter. Unmarked envelope, familiar handwriting. Want me to toss it? She asked. Storm stared at it for a second, then opened it. Inside were 2 pages, both written in uneven, hurried lines. Noah confessed. She admitted she spiraled, that Wolf wasn't what she thought he'd be, that she had tried to paint Storm as the villain to justify her own selfishness. She said she missed him every day, that she'd never stopped loving him, that she hoped, someday, he might remember the good parts, and that if he ever felt lonely, she was still there, still willing, still waiting. Storm folded the letter and set it down, then calmly reached for a lighter. He walked to the balcony, struck the flame, and held the paper there until it turned to smoke. Meadow stepped beside him, silent. He turned to her, eyes steady. "I'm not lonely," he said. She nodded once, took his hand. A week later, Storm launched a foundation, the Resilient Build Project. Its mission, to fund architecture and design scholarships for students who had been emotionally manipulated, abandoned, or shamed for being steady instead of flashy. A foundation for people like him, for the quiet ones, the loyal ones, the ones told they weren't enough until they walked away and the silence roared louder than any exit. At the launch, a reporter asked, "Storm, if you had a message for anyone who doubted you, what would it be?" He smiled. "I don't speak to doubt. I build past it." The room applauded. But somewhere, in a small apartment filled with regrets, a woman watched the clip alone. Eyes red, heart hollow. Her name was never mentioned. And that was the ultimate revenge. She didn't just lose him, she lost the right to be remembered.